Yo, what is going on, guys? Dr. Ethan Turner here with the Fantasy Headliners, and it's time for our Week 11 injury update show. You guys know the drill. I go through every single matchup of the NFL slate and tell you about all the injuries that you need to know about for your fantasy teams. This show, as always, brought to you by our boys over at Fantrax. Make sure you download the Fantrax app. Let them know that the Headliner sent you. But let's get into it, guys, because I got 99 problems, and they're all injuries this week. All right, guys, sadly, we do have to start out with a moment of silence, actually a few moment of silences this week. First up, we got Colts linebacker Shaq Leonard had back surgery. He's been dealing with back issues since last season, and reports are that this surgery is supposed to completely take care of it, wishing him the best in his recovery. Cardinals tight end Zach Ertz going down with a knee sprain. He is not expected to return during the regular season. This is the end of his season. No reports on the extent of the damage of this knee injury, but some early reports did say that they didn't expect the ACL was involved. So we'll see what happens with Zach Ertz. Dolphins defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah tore his tricep. He's done for the year. And then Rams left tackle Alaric Jackson reportedly has blood clots, so he has been ruled out for the rest of the season as well. Let's get some pour one out emojis in the chat for these guys. We're getting to the point of the NFL season where we are going to see a lot of guys end up on the moment of silence list because we're honestly running out of regular season games. And so what used to be a 5-6 week injury is now a season ender. And so sadly, I think we are going to have more moment of silences as the weeks go on. But quick moment of silence for these four guys. All right, heading into our Week 10 accuracy recap. You guys know the drill. Every single week, I'm going to go through and tell you how I did the week before so that you know I'm holding myself accountable. We believe in accountability at the Fantasy Headliners, and the doc is no different. Last week, 87% on my in-out calls. Not a bad week, kind of on average for the year, 88% still on the year. Did have some misses, though. Josh Allen, I did say he was going to be a game-time decision, but I did not expect him to play. Finished as the quarterback 6 on the week. Saints offensive lineman Trevor Penning was not active despite coming off the IR. Tyler Tart, Mo Alley Cox, Buda Baker, Jahan Dotson all ended up playing. Did not expect them to. Ezekiel Elliott and Kyler Murray were both out. Did not expect those guys to miss last week. I did miss on my prize pick play of the week last week. Thought Derrick Henry was going to be absolutely monstrous again. He was not held on to under 100 yards for the first time since week 3. So sorry about that one, guys, if you put some money on it. And then Aaron Jones finishing as an RB2. Technically, he did finish as an RB2, the RB2 for the week. I'm going to count it as a miss, but he overperformed compared to what I thought he was going to be. But I don't think that many people were sitting Aaron Jones. At least I hope you weren't, because I did still say he was going to be a top 24 running back. Just didn't expect him to be the RB2 on the week. I had some other hits, though. Kadarius Toney, increased role. I expected that with Mecole Hardman possibly being out. He actually got put on IR. I'll talk about it a little bit more later. Toney finished as the wide receiver 11.5 PPR, so good week for him. I said Dak Prescott was going to be a quarterback 1. He finished as the QB 7 on the week. Told you guys that you should start Jonathan Taylor coming off his injury. Finished as the RB1 for the week in half PPR, so huge week for Jonathan Taylor. I said that Matt Ryan was possibly going to come back and be the starter right away. He was finished as the QB5 on the week, which I'm pretty surprised about, but he did come back, was the starter, so maybe you picked him up if you needed some quarterback help. Told you guys to sit quite a few players last week. First up was Brandon Cooks, finished as the wide receiver 51. Told you to sit all the pass catchers for the Saints. Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, finished as the wide receiver 59 and 61 on the week, so bad weeks for them. Their offensive line is in shambles right now. We'll talk about a little bit more later in the show. I told you guys to sit Treylon Burks. His first week back finished as the wide receiver 70 on the week. And I told you guys to start Matthew Wright coming in for the Steelers, finished as the 11th best kicker on the week. So if you needed some kicker help, hopefully you picked up Matthew Wright. But that's all I got for you guys for the accuracy recap. Let's get into the injuries for this week, week 11. All right, guys. So we do have 4 teams on bye this week. Not going to talk about players from these teams. If you have any questions about somebody from the Jags, Dolphins, Seahawks, or Bucks, let me know in the comments down below, and I will get to you guys' questions. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time on teams that are not playing. Thursday Night Football has already come and gone. Tennessee at Green Bay. The Titans D lineman Jeffrey Simmons returned, still without kicker Randy Bullock, Amani Hooker, their safety, and linebacker Bud Dupree. The Packers got healthy this week. Linebacker Devondre Campbell, though, is still out. So that's all we really have for Thursday Night Football. So let's get into the games that haven't happened yet. And we're going to start with the Bears at the Falcons. Bears tight end Cole Kmet dealing with a thigh contusion. Didn't practice on Wednesday. Doesn't appear to be worried about missing this game, though. He's pretty firmly in that possibly a tight end 1 this week, but not very sexy category. I feel like pretty much all the tight ends from like tight end 6 to 20 are in this strange category where if they score a touchdown, they're a tight end 1. So I don't really like using the phrase tight end 1. I still think that Kmet is probably a top 12 tight end. He's one of the few tight ends that gets consistent volume week to week. So we'll see what happens. The Falcons are a pretty good matchup for the tight end. And then defensive end, I'm going to screw this up, but Quaden Muhammad has a knee sprain, missed last week, doesn't appear to be on track this week after logging DNPs to start the week. Falcons cornerback AJ Terrell has missed a few weeks now with this hamstring injury that he's dealing with, but he did at least get bumped up to a limited practice this week. He's a game time decision, but I think he is leaning kind of towards a return this week, if not for sure next week for the Falcons cornerback. Moving on to the Panthers at the Ravens. Panthers free safety Justin Burris dealing with a concussion, hasn't practiced, doesn't appear to be on pace to play, returning from this concussion. He's also sick, so that kind of adds more doubt to his ability to play this week. Quarterback PJ Walker dealing with a high ankle sprain, is not expected to play, which sets up a start for Baker Mayfield. Pretty brutal matchup against a good Ravens defense. I think the entire team is kind of doomed for a rough week. I'm not starting DJ Moore in this matchup. I just think the Ravens are going to smoke the Panthers. And then the Panthers do have quite a bit going on the defensive tackle side. 3 guys, Matthew Iodonis, David Nixon, and Marquand McCall, all DNPs for 2 straight days due to illnesses and injuries. So the interior of that defense could be a weak point for the Panthers this week. The Ravens got tight end Mark Andrews dealing with knee and shoulder sprains, limited practices for 2 straight days to start this week. Andrews has been hurt for most of the last month. I was really hoping that the bye week would give him some time to get his body right, and he's ready, I think, to return this week. We'll see what happens. I do think he plays, probably a game time decision. We won't know till Sunday. But he's going up against a pretty deceptively good Carolina defense. I know the defensive tackle position is hurting right now for the Panthers, but they're allowing the 12th fewest fantasy points to tight ends this year. So even if Andrews plays, don't be surprised if he's a little disappointing from a fantasy perspective. Speaking of guys that need to come back soon, running back Gus Edwards dealing with that hamstring strain, limited practices for him this week as well. Also benefiting from the bye week, appears to be testing the hamstring more as the week goes on. We'll see what happens with Gus Edwards, another game time decision, but just know that he is at the highest risk of re-injury in the first 2 weeks that he comes back from this hamstring. So I'm probably sitting him this week because of that hamstring re-injury risk, but I would not fault anybody that's wanting to start him against a banged up defensive line. I still think that Kenyon Drake is probably the Ravens running back that you want in this offense. Heading over to the Browns at the Bills. This game got moved, so just know they are playing in a dome. That's good for quarterback Josh Allen and the pass catchers specifically, but really the entire team on both sides, because it sounds like the Buffalo Bills, Buffalo is about to get about 5 feet of snow projected plus. So there was no way that this game was going to be able to be played in Buffalo. The Browns tight end David Njoku, coming off that high ankle sprain, said he expected to return last week, but didn't really show that in practice, didn't really get any practice time in last week. Does appear to be heading towards at least a game time decision this week. He's been limited in practice. I don't usually start players coming off of the high ankle sprain. I just don't really trust that they are at 100%, especially mid-season high ankle sprains. So I don't really think he's going to be back this week. He's only gotten one limited practice in the last 3 weeks. Seems like next week is probably more realistic for Njoku, but at least keep an eye on him. Maybe he's out there on some waivers. Somebody dropped him, thought he was going to be out a little bit longer. It does look like he's going to be back in the next 2 weeks. The Bills quarterback Josh Allen dealing with that UCL sprain. Really quick turnaround for this injury. Did not expect him to be able to do that. I expected this to take longer for him to heal. Appears like he's ready to play through it, but I think we're all just kind of holding our breath a little bit. We want that elbow to be healthy for Josh Allen. We're hoping nothing else happens to it. Sounds like the team trusts that he's going to take care of it. So we'll see what happens. As long as he's playing, you have to play him in fantasy. But I am a little bit worried about that elbow holding up as he tries to play through this injury. A few defensive players to note for the Bills. Linebacker Tremaine Edmonds dealing with a groin strain. Picked up this injury in week 10. Hasn't practiced yet this week. Doesn't look like he's going to play unless he practices on Friday. Free safety Jordan Poyer, though, dealing with an elbow sprain. Has missed the last 2 games. And by the looks of recent photos, his elbow is not at 100%. Looks pretty gnarly still. Does have quite a bit of swelling on that. And it sounds like his elbow injury was actually worse than Josh Allen. So we'll see. He's practicing in a limited fashion, but he may not be quite ready to play, even though he is practicing. And then defensive end Greg Russo dealing with a high ankle sprain. Another week of DNPs for him. Doesn't look like he is going to play. Heading over to the Commanders at the Texans. Commanders running back Antonio Gibson dealing with a knee sprain, limited practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Didn't quite look to be 100% last week, but a touchdown definitely saved his day. He should be able to play this week. More of an RB3 for me, despite a pretty nice matchup against the Texans team that is just bleeding points to the running back position. Wide receiver Curtis Samuel for the Commanders dealing with a shin injury, limited in practice, but I don't think this is something that's going to keep him from playing. A tough matchup going against a pretty underrated young Texans secondary. Not getting a lot of credit, but this secondary for the Texans, they drafted well this year. And Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley Jr., those 2 guys are playing well for the Texans. So we'll see if Curtis Samuel can make something happen. Tight end Logan Thomas dealing with a rib contusion, limited in practice. Isn't really getting enough volume to justify playing him, but just know that he's banged up. Running back J.D. McKissic's dealing with that neck injury, not practicing. Doesn't look like he's close to returning anytime soon. Starting linebacker Cole Holcomb. Let's see if I can say it right. Dealing with a foot sprain. Has been out the last few weeks and technically returned to the open portion of practice, but it was just working with trainers, so doesn't sound like he is going to be back this week. And then defensive end Chase Young, he's coming off the ACL tear that he had last week, got put on the PUP. Does appear like he may be ready to return this week against the Texans. Not good news for anybody starting Dameon Pierce if Young is in fact fully healthy and is able to play at the level that he was playing at when he was the defensive rookie of the year his rookie season. Texans only got one injury to really speak about, and that is for their rookie cornerback Derek Stingley Jr. dealing with a hamstring strain. Absolutely lights out this year. One of the better draft picks at the top of this year's draft. Derek Stingley Jr. Some concern about foot injury, a Lisfranc injury he had in college, but he has played exceptionally well to start this year. Downgraded from limited to a DNP on Thursday, though. So a little bit of an ominous sign here that he may not be able to suit up. Could be a really nice game, again, for Terry McLaurin, as it does sound like Carson Wentz is not really close to coming back either. Moving over to the Eagles at the Colts. Eagles tight end Dallas Goedert is dealing with a shoulder sprain. He was placed on IR and cannot return until week 15 at the earliest. There is some optimism that he will be able to do that, so you can't really drop him yet, but if he's on a squad that's really fighting for a playoff spot, I'm probably trying to move him to somebody that wants him in the playoffs, that's maybe already got a playoff spot locked up, that is willing to give you something that can be used to then try to get you into the playoffs. Don't hold on to injured players just in case you make it into the playoffs if you are fighting for that playoff spot. Make sure that you are wheeling and dealing these guys that are being placed on IR, because there's also a risk that they don't come back during the regular season. That's a risk that Dallas Goedert is definitely in the category of, because this team is most definitely making the playoffs. So if we get to week 15, 16, 17, and they've already kind of locked up a playoff spot, very possible in their division, we may not see Dallas Goedert again. So just know that as you're kind of expecting to maybe trade him or trade for him. Wide receiver A.J. Brown dealing with an ankle sprain. Has been limited in practice all week after tweaking his ankle, was held to just one catch for 7 yards last week. So I wonder if this injury happened early in the game. I did see him kind of limp off once and then come back, so we'll see what happened with that. It's hard to sit A.J. Brown if he's playing, because he still has the opportunity to absolutely explode, especially now that Dallas Goedert is going to miss significant time. So I don't know. He's not one that has been able to produce when he is banged up. When he's fully healthy, he's a stud. But A.J. Brown hurt, not quite as sexy of a wide receiver pick for your fantasy team. Wide receiver Devontae Smith dealing with a knee sprain. Has been dealing with a knee issue after coming off a solid fantasy week. I am expecting to practice him full on Friday, but if he gets a limited work in, I still think there's a good chance he plays on Sunday. With Goedert out, Smith becomes a lot more intriguing fantasy option week to week. We've seen him blow up a couple times this year. I would like to see him more consistency out of him now that Dallas Goedert is going to miss some significant time. The Colts running back Deion Jackson dealing with a knee sprain, limited on Thursday after 2 weeks of DNPs. Still kind of a long shot to play, but I do like to see him making some progress here. It does sound like Deion Jackson may be close to returning, if not this week, then next week. And then cornerback Kenny Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, and linebacker Zaire Franklin all dealing with illness. Quite a few guys dealing with illness. It's hard for me to project illness, but the fact that they haven't practiced all week tells me that there is a good chance that one of, if not all three of these guys could miss this game on Sunday. Illness going through, and we'll see if anybody else from the Colts picks this up, because it looks like it's becoming quite an issue for the team. Heading over to the Jets at the Patriots, just two wide receivers to talk about in this matchup, one for each team. Jets wide receiver Corey Davis has a knee injury, still missing practice, doesn't look like he's going to play, but the Patriots wide receiver Devontae Parker is dealing with a knee sprain himself, is back practicing in a limited capacity this week, and should make his return against the Jets, who, interestingly, he did suffer this injury playing against in Week 8. So kind of a little bit of a comeback game for Devontae Parker if he's able to play. Moving on to the Rams at the Saints. Rams wide receiver Cooper Kupp, probably the biggest injury of the week, dealing with a high ankle sprain. He had tightrope surgery, which is where they basically secure the two bones of the ankle together so that they can't separate. When you have a high ankle sprain, the syndesmosis, or the ligament that holds the two leg shin bones together and keeps them from separating when you step, that tears. And so what happens is you step and it kind of bows out and it keeps it from healing. What a tightrope surgery does is it ties a rope through the bottom of those two bones and then anchors them together so that when you step, it does not separate apart. Basically, he's trying to speed up his recovery, but he's still been put on IR looking at week 15 at the earliest. And I am definitely worried about the Rams, kind of the opposite of the Eagles and Dallas Goedert. If they're already ruled out of the playoffs, or it doesn't look like they're going to make the playoffs, we may not see Cooper Kupp again this season. I hope that's not the case, but it is a possibility that we need to consider when talking about Cooper Kupp and trading for him or trading him away. Quarterback Matthew Stafford, though, dealing with that concussion, sat last week. I said on the injury show last week, don't be surprised if he misses that game. So hopefully you were paying attention and made sure that you had a backup plan for Matthew Stafford. He's back practicing in full, but who is he going to be throwing the ball to? That's the question I have. Tyler Higbee is the only Rams player this season that has had a game with over 70 receiving yards, not named Cooper Kupp. So is it Tyler Higbee? I think so. I think that Matthew Stafford has a new binky, and it's going to be Tyler Higbee. Moving on to the Saints, Mark Ingram still not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. Same thing with Marshawn Lattimore dealing with that abdominal injury. Not practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. But the real story here for the Saints is their O-line. Currently down 4 starting O-linemen. Left tackle Trevor Penning isn't expected to return this week. Center Eric McCoy was placed on IR. We talked about him last week. Left guard Andres Pete still isn't practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. And then left tackle, the backup left tackle, James Hurst, has a concussion, hasn't been practicing. Doesn't look like he's going to play. So this is going to be a first for me, but my prize pick play of the week this week is actually the Rams defense over 2 sacks against the Saints this week. Head on over to Prize Picks, use the code Headliners, get a $100 first deposit match on the Headliners using that code Headliners at Prize Picks. Moving on to the Lions at the Giants. Lions running back DeAndre Swift dealing with shoulder and ankle injuries. I said last week, the guy is not healthy. I don't care what they say on the practice reports. And this week, it sounds like he's practicing in full. But again, I just don't trust it. They're not using him like he's healthy. And that is a major concern for me. I think he plays, but until he can show me that he is healthy enough to take the bulk of the workload away from Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, I'm just going to say it, he's a sit for me in most lineups. Wide receiver Josh Reynolds dealing with that back injury, was able to practice in a limited fashion after missing multiple weeks. Good sign. Still think he's a long shot to play, but at least he is back practicing in some capacity. And then center Frank Ragnow for the Lions dealing with a foot injury, was seen in a walking boot after the game on Sunday. The team is not concerned about this, and it isn't the same foot that cost him 13 games last season, but still not practicing for 2 days for a foot injury for a big guy. That is concerning for me. I am a little bit worried that Frank Ragnow could sit out a week like he did earlier in this year with a foot injury as well. Moving on to the Giants, got tight end Daniel Bellinger with that orbital socket fracture. He's not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to come back anytime soon. And then wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson dealing with a hamstring strain was downgraded on Thursday to a DNP. Robinson is at serious risk of missing this game. Darius Slayton may find himself another solid week as kind of a wide receiver 3 with some upside. And I just want to see the Giants use Saquon Barkley a little bit more in the passing game. Why are we just running this guy all over the place? Like, I'm not going to complain about the rushing attempts. It's fine. But, like, can't we let him catch passes too? He's really, really good at that. Come on now. Let the guy catch some passes. Moving on to the Raiders at the Broncos. Raiders wide receiver Devontae Adams dealing with abdominal pain. A little bit worrisome, especially when we know what happened with Mecole Hardman. He had abdominal pain and ended up on IR. We'll talk about it a little bit more. But I don't think that's what's going on here with Devontae Adams. Has been absolutely insane without Waller and Renfrow playing. Both those guys still on IR. So I think he's going to play, and he's only been out in a limited fashion, so this is probably just more maintenance for Devontae Adams. You are throwing him in your lineups. I don't care who the matchup is, even against kind of a tough matchup against Broncos, Pat Surtain. Moving on to the Broncos, you got wide receiver Jerry Jeudy dealing with an ankle sprain. Jeudy avoided a major injury. Sounded like it could have been serious, or at least may have been serious on video. It was non-contact, but kind of maybe a little bit of contact. Either way, was concerning when he left the game. He is not practicing this week, so it doesn't look like he's going to play, but at least know that it is not as serious as what they thought. And then wide receiver KJ Hamler dealing with a hamstring strain, missed last week, still not practicing, doesn't look like he's going to play. Cortland Sutton, another interesting option for you on Prize Picks, over 65.5 yards, looking really nice. He had 11 targets with both these guys hurt last week. Moving on to the Cowboys at the Vikings. Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott dealing with that knee sprains, kept him out a couple weeks now. He was limited all week last week and still ended up sitting. So it's hard to gauge how much pressure is on the Cowboys to push him back into playing when Tony Pollard is filling in this role so well. Zeke is a game time decision. He's going to be a sit for me even if he plays, but I would not be surprised if he didn't. And then we got defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence dealing with a foot sprain. Coach Mike McCarthy said that he expected Lawrence to practice on Thursday, but then Lawrence didn't practice on Thursday. So Coach either doesn't know what's going on with him, or he's kind of blowing smoke up because he does not want the Vikings to know that DeMarcus Lawrence could be sitting. If that happens, I think Dalvin Cook may be able to put the Vikings on his back, especially if Lawrence is out. He is their best run defender, and Dalvin Cook may have to put the team on his back because Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson dealing with a toe injury. Never want to see this for wide receivers. Was added to the injury report on Wednesday. No reports Sunday that something was wrong. This is just kind of concerning to me because we didn't hear anything about it on Sunday. So is it just sore from that game? Did he pick up a new injury in practice? We don't really know what's happening with Justin Jefferson, but all I do know is he's been limited on Wednesday and Thursday in practice. We're going to have to update you guys during the live shows this weekend. If something changed with Justin Jefferson, just know we will let you guys know as quickly as we know. But for right now, I'm still cautiously optimistic that Jefferson will play. Heading over to the Bengals at the Steelers, Bengals wide receiver Ja'Marr Chase coming off that hip fracture. There were reports when this injury happened that Ja'Marr Chase may be ready to return after the Bengals bye, but we're here after the Bengals bye, and it sounds like reports are saying he is still on crutches, which means he's non-weight bearing. I think he's still at least a week out, but the continued use of crutches is definitely concerning. That early reports were way off on this injury and the recovery timeline. This is not something that necessarily heals perfectly every single time. So we're hoping Ja'Marr Chase gets healthy. There are some reports from the team that they think maybe next week he'll be ready, but I'm not really trusting it until I see it with Ja'Marr Chase. Now, as for the Steelers, we got running back Najee Harris dealing with a knee injury. Had one of the better weeks of his season last week, and the team kind of finally got the running game going a little bit. He is sore from that game, but doesn't appear like anything that is worth worrying about for Najee Harris. He is still startable against the Bengals. Free safety Minkah Fitzpatrick had an appendectomy, returned to practice in full on Thursday. Seems like he's ready to play after missing last week's game. And then linebacker TJ Watt dealing with that pec tear from earlier in the year has been, he has designated rest this week after returning to last week's game. We're going to see this a lot with TJ Watt. The team is going to be careful with him. They're not going to give him a ton of practice reps because he is playing through something that a lot of people expected him to cost him his entire season. So the team's going to be careful with him. They're not going to put him through a ton of practice reps. It's TJ Watt. As long as he's healthy and playing on Sundays, the team is going to be happy with that. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, Chiefs at Chargers, an absolute banger of a game. Can't wait to watch this one. Chiefs wide receiver Mecole Hardman, I've mentioned him a couple times, had abdominal pain last week. I said last week this was a strange injury, and apparently it only got stranger as the week went on because Hardman is now being put on IR. Most certainly a sports hernia. I would guess that's where this abdominal pain is coming from. Haven't gotten official word on that yet. Just me speculating as a doctor. But I would be curious if he gets surgery, if he tries to return this year. We'll see what happens. We haven't heard anything about a surgery yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not on the horizon. Moving on to wide receiver Juju Smith-Schuster dealing with that concussion. Really scary injury for Juju. Took an absolute shot in the middle of the field and appeared to have a fencing response. Now, the fencing response, I know it's scary when it happens, but just know it's not indicative of the severity of a concussion. It's just a natural neurological response when the brain gets damaged very quickly, like it does during a collision like what Juju Smith-Schuster went through. Shaping up for a huge opportunity, though, for Kadarius Toney, because I don't think Schuster is going to play. I like Kadarius Toney as a solid wide receiver too, with top 8 upside if things go well for him. Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen dealing with that hamstring strain. I get sick of saying this every single week, but he is at least practicing in a limited capacity. He said he's not playing until he's 100%. I don't think he's playing this week, but hope this means he's on his way to maybe playing again this season. We'll see what happens with Keenan Allen. Wide receiver Mike Williams dealing with the high ankle sprain. Williams also practicing in limited fashion. I'm a little bit more optimistic that Mike Williams could return this week, but he's still a game time decision. And I'd say it's probably a 30 to 40% chance he plays. I still think it's more likely that he doesn't play this week and then comes back next week. Kicker Dustin Hopkins dealing with that hamstring strain, hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday. It's time, baby. Cameron Dicker, the kicker, again, who has put together now 2 straight top 10 kicker weeks. Just go ahead and check your waiver wires. Cameron Dicker could still be out there. A lot of people are not paying attention to backup kickers or kickers they haven't ever heard of, but this dude has been lights out. 4 field goals in the first half last week, finished, I believe, as the kicker 4 on the week. So Cameron Dicker, if he's still out there, needs to be rostered, needs to be played if you play in kicker leagues. And then tight end Gerald Everett dealing with a groin strain, left the game, didn't return last week. A little bit concerning for him. Seems possible that he could miss this week despite getting some limited practices in on Wednesday and Thursday. If he plays, he's a tight end 2 for me. So I kind of like him as that, needs a touchdown to probably be a tight end 1, but probably going to get enough volume to be worthy of starting. Last game of the week, Monday Night Football, 49ers at the Cardinals. 49ers only really have to worry about Eric Armstead. He's still dealing with a foot and ankle injuries that he's had all year. Hasn't practiced in a long time. Doesn't look like he is anywhere close to playing. Surprised they haven't put him on IR, so I guess maybe he's just dealing with something that's hard to shake. But the Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray, that's going to be the real question in this game, dealing with that hamstring strain. Practicing in limited fashion on Thursday, but he did the same thing last week and ended up sitting out. So he's a game time decision, but we should have a better idea on Sunday as to whether or not he is playing. I'm going to project him to be in, but playing him on a Monday, really have to be cautious with it. Unless you've got Jimmy Garoppolo and you can scoop him up as kind of an emergency backup. Kyler Murray, I don't know. I don't really like starting guys that I have injury concerns with on heading into a Monday, because there's a good chance that you could still take a 0 and that could kill your fantasy week. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins dealing with a hamstring strain. This came up kind of right in the middle of the week. Nothing really known about this except that he didn't practice on Thursday. If he practices on Friday, I'm not worried about it. If he sits again on Friday, there's a good chance that he could be at risk of missing this game. So pay attention to DeAndre Hopkins. Some good news. Couple good news here for the Cardinals here. We got wide receiver Marquise Brown coming off that foot fracture. Was able to return to practice this week. Has been designated to return. Looked good in the limited videos that I saw of him running around. He looks quick. Doesn't look like he's favoring that foot at all. Good news for the Cardinals. I'd still be, kind of banking on them returning him next week, not this week, but it is good to see that he is practicing. And I am excited to see Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins playing together in this offense. I think this could be the thing the Cardinals need to kind of turn their season around. And last but not least, we got kicker Matt Prater dealing with that hip strain. Back practicing in full. He's finally over the hip injury that's plagued him on and off over the last month. He slides back into a really solid streaming option for kickers. Check your waiver wires if Matt Prater's around. Feel free to pick him up. All right, guys, that's it for Week 11 Injury Update Show. I get it. That was a long show. I appreciate you guys holding out, listening to the whole thing. If you guys get the chance, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the video, turn on notifications so you aren't missing any of the injury update shows for the year. Want to thank our sponsors one last time before we get out of here. Prize Picks, Fantrax, and head on over to Manscaped, 20% off and free shipping if you use the code Headliners. But that's all I got for you guys. Week 11 injury show in the books. The doc is out.